During the Easter weekend in April 1992, Dana Ewell informed his relatives that he couldn't reach his parents, Dale and Glee Ewell, and his sister, Tiffany Ewell. Dana was still at the family's California beach house, where he had spent the weekend with his girlfriend and her father, an FBI agent. Upon the housekeeper's arrival for duty following the Easter weekend, the discovery she made in the house sent chills down her spine. The distressed housekeeper rushed to a neighbor's home, prompting an immediate call to the police, who arrived at the scene of the grim discovery of the 3 lifeless bodies. Initially presumed to be a botched burglary, it was soon determined that nothing had been stolen, leading authorities to conclude it was a planned murder. But who could have had a motive to kill this innocent family? Investigations ensued, eliminating several potential suspects until one unlikely person emerged as the prime suspect. This is the horrifying case of the Ewell family. Dale Ewell was born in Ohio during the Great Depression, instilling in him a strong work ethic and appreciation for every single dollar he earned. His upbringing in a family that endured economic hardship likely fueled his determination and ambition. After serving in the Air Force, Dale found success as a businessman, eventually becoming the president and owner of Western Piper Sales Incorporated, a company that specialized in selling small aircraft. He expanded his financial ventures by investing in several farms with profits from Western Piper. Dale had married Glee Michelle, a woman who taught in elementary school, worked as a translator for the CIA, and served on a commission at the State Bar of California. Together, they became parents, welcoming Tiffany in 1967 and Dana in 1971. Dale's achievements afforded the Ewell family a comfortable residence in Sunnyside, a beachfront property in Pajaro Dunes, as well as luxury automobiles and designer clothes. The primary source of the Ewells' income stemmed from the sale of light aircraft and extensive investments in the stock market. Having established his aviation enterprise successfully, Dale ventured into purchasing several farms, ultimately amassing significant wealth. Dale and Glee's combined net worth was estimated at $8 million, portraying them as the epitome of the American dream, even though they maintained a modest lifestyle. While Tiffany followed in her parents' footsteps, Dana diverged significantly from their path. While attending university, Dana Ewell portrayed himself as a prosperous entrepreneur, asserting that he was the source of his family's wealth. His fabricated narrative garnered attention from a local newspaper and even made its way into Ewell's school yearbook in 1990. Enrolled at Santa Clara University, Dana was preoccupied with notions of affluence and stylish living. He possessed a BMW and had access to funds enabling him to indulge in luxury items such as jewelry at his leisure. In contrast, his older sister Tiffany, who graduated from Fresno University, exhibited a more down-to-earth demeanor. From a young age, Dana displayed a tendency to lie a lot and fabricated many of his stories. Despite his exceptional intellect and education, Dana's aspirations transcended mere comfort, wealth, and a promising future. He shared his father's ambition, but lacked the determination to pursue his goals through legitimate means. Even during his time as a student at the University of Santa Clara, Dana felt compelled to concoct grandiose tales of his achievements and importance, which were entirely false. He proved to be a pathological liar, deceiving both faculty and peers into believing he was the head of a multi-million-dollar enterprise. Within his intricate web of lies, he portrayed himself as having begun his career as a stockbroker at the age of 18, subsequently transitioning to aircraft sales and ultimately ascending to the presidency of his own aircraft manufacturing company. The underlying tension within the father-son dynamic, characterized by dwindling communication, remained largely concealed from others. Dana's habit of fabricating outlandish tales about himself likely caused embarrassment for his father and could have led to conflicts between them. Despite Dale's upbringing in modest circumstances and his generous support for his children, it appeared that Dana harbored an insatiable sense of entitlement. Despite his privileged upbringing, Dana Ewell portrayed himself as a self-absorbed, egotistical individual primarily focused on his own wealth and social status. On Sunday, April 19, 1992, Sunnyside, California experienced mild, partly sunny weather, creating an ideal Easter Sunday afternoon atmosphere. Dale, aged 59, along with his 57-year-old wife Glee and their 24-year-old daughter Tiffany, had spent the Easter weekend at their beach house. Glee and Tiffany returned directly to Sunnyside by car, while Dale opted to fly his private plane to his hangar before driving home. Unbeknownst to them, upon their arrival home after their 2.5-hour journey, they were ambushed almost immediately upon entering. Tiffany was fatally shot in the head first, followed shortly by Glee, who was shot multiple times. 30 minutes later, as Dale arrived in the driveway, unaware of the tragedy that had befallen his family, he too was fatally shot as he opened the door from the garage into the house. The perpetrator, having stayed in the house, lay in wait for Dale, who had no idea that he had very little time left to live. 2 days later, 21-year-old Dana Ewell, the youngest member of the family, reached out to relatives and friends in Sunnyside, expressing his inability to reach his parents. Despite residing with his parents, Dana had spent the Easter weekend in San Francisco, around 200 miles away, with his girlfriend Monica Zent and her father John Zent, an FBI agent. On Tuesday, April 21, 1992, the Ewells' longtime housekeeper, Juanita Avenita, arrived for her usual work duties. Upon entering the kitchen, she discovered Tiffany's lifeless body lying face down in a pool of blood, her hands tucked beneath her. Distraught, the housekeeper sought help from a neighbor, prompting a call to the police. Meanwhile, Dana was still in Monterey, California, at the time of the murders. Upon being contacted by the authorities, his girlfriend's father promptly arranged for Dana to fly to Fresno. Dana appeared visibly distressed throughout the ordeal. Subsequently, the police embarked on an extensive investigation, dedicating numerous days to gathering evidence and interviewing witnesses. The crime scene was meticulously staged to resemble a failed robbery, but seasoned detectives recognized the signs of a premeditated burglary designed to make it appear as though the family stumbled upon the intruder and was subsequently murdered. Upon closer inspection, detectives noted several anomalies: the absence of weapons, bloodstains, footprints, or DNA evidence. Instead, the detectives observed a methodically planned and executed attack. The precision of the assailant's shots was remarkable, with only one miss, and the perpetrator had even retrieved the spent bullet casings. Inside the home, investigators discovered a box of 9mm ammunition purchased by Dale, later determined to have been used in the killings. Although the home gave the appearance of being ransacked, no valuable items were actually taken. There were no signs of forced entry through windows or doors, and the alarm, typically activated, had been deactivated. The scene seemed deliberately arranged to suggest a burglary in progress upon the Ewells' return. Investigators meticulously delved into the backgrounds of the victims, searching for any clues that might link to their homicides. Dale's past involvements, including selling airplanes for an individual later convicted of drug smuggling in the 1970s, and a problematic real estate transaction with his brother that threatened to cost investors millions, underwent thorough scrutiny. However, both incidents were eventually dismissed as having no connection to the murders. The police systematically eliminated all other potential suspects with motives, ultimately focusing their attention on Dana, who stood to benefit greatly from the tragedy. Being the sole survivor of the Ewell family and the primary beneficiary of the estate, Dana naturally became a person of interest. Despite having a seemingly airtight alibi, being in the company of his girlfriend and her FBI agent father at the time of the murders, police couldn't shake their suspicions about him. Dana's behavior did little to assuage their concerns, only serving to heighten their intuition regarding his involvement. Despite outward displays of distress over the murders, including offering rewards for information and even a $50,000 reward for the capture of the killer, Dana's grief appeared disingenuous. His emotional response to the brutal slaying of his own family seemed lacking, failing to convey the expected horror and anguish. Instead, his focus appeared to be primarily on matters related to his parents' wills and inheritance, rather than mourning the tragic loss of his loved ones. In a particularly unsettling move, he even invited a friend to tour the house, where bloodstains and spatter were still visible, displaying a disturbing lack of sensitivity. Allegedly, he even expressed disdain for the police investigation, claiming they were a bunch of dummies that would never solve the case. Thus began a prolonged and tense game of cat and mouse between Dana and the authorities, spanning 3 grueling years as they pursued every possible lead. Adding fuel to the escalating conflict, Dale's brothers reached out to authorities, accusing their nephew of wrongdoing. They alleged that during the reading of the wills, Dana had flown into a rage upon learning that trust provisions would restrict his access to the $8 million estate until he reached his 30s. According to their account, Dana had even slammed his fist on the desk and shouted, "How could he have done this to me?" referring to his father. The arrangement stipulated that his parents would cover his expenses until he turned 25, followed by receiving investment dividends until he reached 30. Half of it would be accessible to him at the age of 30, with the remaining half available at 35. Before the funerals for Dale, Glee, and Tiffany, the Ewell brothers took steps to hinder Dana's efforts to claim what he believed was rightfully his. However, Dana managed to secure around $300,000 from an insurance policy that either wasn't subject to the trust provisions or had been overlooked by mistake. Dana's uncles, his father's 3 brothers, were actively preventing him from inheriting any portion of his father's assets and wealth, causing significant frustration for Dana. Despite the mounting pressure from investigators closing in on him and accusations from members of his extended family implicating him in the murders as a ploy to gain control of the family estate, Dana continued to live his life seemingly unaffected. He continued to spend money recklessly, splurging on lavish gifts for his girlfriend Monica and even contributing towards her educational expenses. However, the source of his seemingly endless funds remained a puzzle. Suspecting that money played a significant role in the murders, investigators intensified their scrutiny. They uncovered evidence indicating that Dana had been embezzling money from various sources, including his grandmother's $400,000 trust account. By the time detectives intervened, the elderly woman had been left with a mere $2,000 to cover her ongoing care expenses at a nursing facility. The revelation that Dana had exploited his vulnerable grandmother for financial gain only solidified the police's suspicions about his character. Despite this damning discovery, authorities still needed conclusive evidence linking Dana to the murders before they could make an arrest. One of Dana's college acquaintances, who was usually captivated by his elaborate tales and his portrayal of a pampered, affluent lifestyle, was one Joel Radovchich. Joel found Dana intriguing, especially his wealth, success, and apparent ability to effortlessly attract the most attractive women. People around them were puzzled about what they had in common, as they were as different as night and day. While Dana sought higher social status, Joel was more interested in video games, firearms, and explosives. Despite their disparities, Joel's friendship with Dana provided him access to exclusive parties and introductions to desirable women. Shortly after the murders, Joel had dropped out of school. As mentioned earlier, within weeks of the Ewell family's tragic demise, he visited their home for a tour, eventually becoming Dana's roommate in the same residence. Joel's association with Dana marked a crucial turning point in the investigation. Both Dana and Joel began making unusual cash purchases, such as helicopter piloting lessons, despite Joel lacking an apparent source of income. As a result, both individuals came under surveillance, and investigators observed their communication, which was through sophisticated pagers and payphones. Authorities had Dana's pager cloned and wiretapped his landline. In May 1993, Joel was overheard by an officer conversing on a payphone where he was recorded saying, "They don't have evidence. They will try to catch you in a lie." On another occasion, he was heard advising, "Just play the game." And without a doubt, Dana continued playing the game, buying his girlfriend a new car and covering her law school tuition. After exhausting the insurance payout, as previously mentioned, he bilked $400,000 from his grandmother's account, leaving her with only $2,000 to cover her nursing home expenses. In 1994, investigators shifted their focus to forensic analysis, which revealed that the murder weapon was a specialized 9mm assault rifle manufactured in Colorado. Records from the company indicated that such a rifle had been purchased by one Ernest Jack Ponce shortly before April 1992. Interestingly, Jack happened to be a high school friend of Joel. Upon questioning, Jack initially denied buying the gun and later claimed it was purchased as a birthday gift for himself, unknown to Joel, and alleged that the gun had been stolen. The evidence was mounting against Dana and Joel. At one point, detectives attempted to unsettle Dana during their visit to his university dormitory, informing him of their belief that Joel was responsible for murdering his family. Dana remained silent, his face visibly drained of color. After the detectives departed, unaware they were being observed, Dana and his girlfriend Monica, who was present during the visit, hurriedly made a phone call to Radovchich. On March 2, 1995, the police took action and arrested Dana and Joel. Joining them were Peter Radovchich, Joel's brother, and Jack Ponce. Peter had struck a deal with authorities, offering testimony against his brother and Dana in exchange for immunity. He confessed to the police that he had crafted a homemade silencer and attached it to the murder weapon, disposed of the gun barrel, Joel's tennis shoes worn during the killings, and a collection of gun enthusiast magazines. Peter admitted to carrying out these actions in collaboration with Jack Ponce. Upon his arrest, Jack provided a contrasting narrative regarding the firearm. He confessed to purchasing it for Joel, but claimed ignorance about its intended use in the murders. Additionally, he corroborated Peter's account of their joint disposal of evidence. Jack, like Peter, received immunity in exchange for his testimony at trial. As a result of Peter and Jack's statements, the barrel of the murder weapon was located buried in a dirt field in Reseda. Dana and Joel, however, were obviously not offered any plea deals. Instead, they were charged with 3 counts of first-degree murder and special circumstances, rendering them eligible for the death penalty. The trial didn't commence until late 1997. Dana and Joel, who had once been close enough to travel to Mexico together, share flying lessons, and even live in the same house where Dale, Glee, and Tiffany were killed, now had separate legal representation and adopted different stances during the trial. Prosecutors contended that Dana's motive stemmed from greed, alleging that he had promised Joel a portion of the inheritance. Dana's attorney argued for his innocence, claiming that Joel and Jack had planned and carried out the murders. Meanwhile, Joel's attorney, acknowledging the weight of the evidence against his client, aimed to save him from the death penalty. During his testimony, Jack Ponce revealed that he not only purchased the murder weapon for Joel and aided in its disposal, but that Joel had also provided him the details of the events that transpired on that fateful day in April 1992, which he was ready to share. Dana had approached Joel, pleading for a favor which was hard for him to reject. Acting as the executor of Dana's plan, Joel entered the Ewell residence with specific instructions. Having meticulously prepared by shaving his entire body, Joel waited patiently for 12 hours, perched on a plastic sheet to avoid leaving any trace of DNA behind, even a small eyelash. He was also instructed to ensure no bullet casings were left at the scene. Tiffany was the first victim, passing by Joel without noticing him before he fatally shot her in the back of the head. Glee, however, caught a glimpse of the assailant and was struck by a bullet. Despite attempting to flee to the office, bleeding profusely, she was pursued and mercilessly shot multiple times by Joel, who then straddled her. In a chilling moment, just before firing the fatal shot, Glee locked eyes with Joel, recognizing him as a friend Dana had introduced to the family a month prior. After fatally shooting Glee, Joel proceeded to change the magazines in the gun and don fresh gloves, awaiting Dale's arrival. He subsequently murdered Dale as well. However, during Jack's testimony recounting Dale's murder from Joel's perspective, he had made a crucial error by mentioning "and I saw the eye," which undermined the credibility of his testimony. The jury viewed his account with skepticism, suspecting greater involvement than he had admitted, but his immunity agreement shielded him from facing charges for the deaths. On May 27, 1998, 8 months after the trial commenced, the jury unanimously found Dana Ewell and Joel Radovchich guilty on all charges. However, they were unable to reach a consensus on the sentencing. While 2 votes spared Joel from the death penalty, Dana narrowly escaped the same fate by only 1 vote. They both received 3 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. Dana was incarcerated at Corcoran State Prison, located 50 miles south of Fresno, where he found himself among fellow inmates including notorious figures like Charles Manson. Unfortunately, his grandmother, whom he had stolen from, passed away in 1999. In the years following his conviction, Dana professed to have undergone a spiritual transformation, embracing Christianity. He is registered on an online prison pen pal platform, where in part of his profile he states, "A finance graduate from Santa Clara University. I was beginning my career in investment banking when some extraordinarily painful events turned my world upside down." Meanwhile, Joel Radovchich was imprisoned at Mule Creek State Prison in Ione, about 2 hours south of San Francisco, which has housed other infamous inmates such as Tex Watson and Robert John Bardo. Jack Ponce went to law school, eventually becoming an attorney. Monica Zent ended her relationship with Dana, completed her law school studies, and established a thriving law practice. While Monica was scrutinized during the investigation, no evidence implicating her involvement could be uncovered, aside from her apparent reluctance to engage in the case that led to her boyfriend's convictions for murder and the fact that he had utilized some of the ill-gotten funds to contribute towards her law school expenses. Greed, entitlement, heartlessness, 3 words that perfectly described Dana Ewell. Dana's insatiable desire for wealth and his willingness to manipulate and betray those closest to him ultimately led to the brutal demise of his own family. It is sad and unfortunate what befell the victims of this tale at the hands of their avaricious and manipulative brother and son, along with those who aided him. December 26, 1997, during the early morning hours in East Bremerton, Washington, a neighbor notices smoke coming from the Hatchney residence and alerts the other neighbors. It doesn't take too long before a 911 call is made and authorities rush their way to the scene. Authorities arrived and got the fire under control, only to then make a grueling discovery, which was accompanied by a smell of burning flesh that made them fear the worst. Inside, they unfortunately find the body of a 28-year-old woman who neighbors immediately recognize as that of Dawn Hatchney. Her husband, Nick Hatchney, had gone for a hunting trip with friends, and at around 10 a.m., he came back home with their dog only to find the house had been on fire and his wife had died as a result of it. Initially ruled as an accidental fire, a gruesome discovery would be made years later and would reveal that something far more sinister was behind it. This is the heartbreaking case of Dawn Hatchney. Dawn Marie Tienhara was born on December 5, 1969, in Seattle, Washington, to Donald Tienhara and Diana Parmel. Donald worked in a shipyard while Diana took care of the home. Dawn was their eldest child and only daughter, and together grew up with her 3 brothers, Dennis, Darren, and Derek, in Bremerton, Washington. According to her mother, her devoutness began at an early age, with her embracing faith and accepting the Lord into her life when she was 4 years old. Dawn faced hardships in her childhood due to her parents' struggles with anxiety and depression that would often lead to frequent conflicts. Around 1980, Diana met a new man, prompting her departure from the family to move in with him. This led to the arrival of another baby. However, the relationship hit a snag, forcing Diana, alongside her newborn, to return to Donald and her other children. Despite these childhood obstacles she faced, Dawn turned all her challenges into doing well in school, dedicating herself to achieving excellent grades. At just 12 years old, she had participated in the Scripps National Spelling Bee, an opportunity that not only led her to the White House, but also allowed her to meet the late former president, Ronald Reagan. In 1988, Dawn graduated and achieved the honor of being the valedictorian at Bremerton Christian School before joining the Northwest College of the Assemblies of God in Seattle. During her college years, she crossed paths with Nick Hatchney, and an instant connection sparked between them. However, concerns arose among Dawn's friends when she referred to Nick as the one after just a few dates. They hoped their friend would find a companion who embraced her with unwavering support and genuine affection, expressing apprehension about Nick as they perceived Nick as excessively assertive and overly self-assured, not aligning with Dawn's personality. Nick's upbringing paralleled Dawn's in some ways. He was born and raised in Washington, but unlike her, he hailed from Poulsbo, a coastal city in Washington. Nick also faced troubles within his family from a young age. His father, Dan, immersed in constant work as a mechanic, remained distant when home, neglecting family time and household responsibilities. Meanwhile, Sandra, his mother, juggled a home daycare and foster care, leaving Nick feeling neglected. He confided in friends, expressing a sense of being less favored than his siblings and even the foster kids, perceiving his mother's feelings toward him as hate. Struggling through his mother's prolonged bouts of depression and his emotionally distant father, Nick lacked emotional support or connection from his parents. Despite this isolation, Nick sought comfort in the Bible, finding solace and deepening his involvement in Christianity. While his faith bolstered his self-assurance during his adolescence, it occasionally distanced him from others due to his newfound confidence. Nick and Dawn crossed paths for the first time at their shared college. Dawn's friends found it strange that she would take an interest in Nick, given his opposite traits as mentioned earlier. With time, they began noticing a change in Dawn. She had always displayed confidence through her extrovert nature, was always self-sufficient, consistently driven and striving to conquer new goals. However, in Nick's presence, everything seemed to be the other way around. She became timid, withdrawn, and indecisive, frequently deferring to Nick's choices, even if they clashed with her preferences or made her uncomfortable. It appeared as though Nick had a negative influence on her, contrary to bringing out her best self. Despite this, their love endured, and their relationship persisted, eventually ending up in an engagement after Nick proposed on Alki Beach in 1990. They sealed their commitment with marriage on April 20th, 1991, subsequently moving back to Bremerton. At that point, both had completed their degrees. Dawn secured a position as a loan officer, while Nick embarked on his role as a youth pastor at Christ Community Church on Bainbridge Island, situated across the bay from Seattle. Nick had aspired to become a youth pastor, specifically targeting Christ Community Church due to his bond with his former youth pastor, Bob, also known as P.B. Smith. At that time, P.B. Smith remained with the church, having overseen its affairs since the late 1980s, but had now partnered with Pastor Robert Billy Craig in guiding the congregation. P.B. Smith adopted a more amiable, yet conservative approach to church leadership, whereas Pastor Robert was known for his stringent and radical teachings. Throughout their marriage, Nick consistently made decisions without any opposition from Dawn. Why was that the case, though? Well, both Nick and Dawn adhered to Christian fundamentalism, a community where the wife is expected to submit to her husband's authority, believing it aligns with God's plan. At Christ Community Church, this ideology was explicitly promoted and deemed acceptable. The church even practiced exorcisms on afflicted members, advocated for families to have as many children as deemed by God, and endorsed homeschooling for these children. Their teachings emphasized women's modesty and addressed uncomfortable inquiries about sex. Speaking out against these norms risked excommunication from the church, fostering a climate of silence among dissenters, driven by fear of expulsion. Dawn and the congregation found themselves entrenched in what many would label a cult, with her husband Nick playing a pivotal role in the perilous practices. Nick had shifted his admiration toward Robert and sought direct mentorship under him, steering away from his initial close relationship with P.B. Smith. Dissatisfied with Smith's more relaxed approach, Nick felt he wasn't learning enough and disapproved of what he perceived as leniency, favoring the stringent and extreme methods of Pastor Robert. On the other hand, Robert viewed Nick as a means to accomplish his agenda, ousting Smith and assuming complete control as the senior pastor of the church. By 1997, Dawn and Nick had encountered home-related issues as they frequently relocated, residing in properties they refurbished to sell. Dawn yearned to establish a family and settle into a permanent residence. To address this, Nick found a fixer-upper in East Bremerton, intending for them to move in, renovate, and make it their home. However, the home purchase, renovations, and their house-flipping venture had pushed the couple into debt. Although their outward appearance showcased a seemingly flawless relationship, with Dawn portrayed as the supportive wife accommodating Nick's desires, underlying issues existed far beyond anyone's perception. Dawn had even made a request jokingly to a friend about potentially living with her instead of returning to her parents in case she and Nick ended their relationship. Meanwhile, Nick continued accumulating debt by regularly loaning money to fellow church members. He embarked on his ambitious venture, establishing a Christian youth camp. This endeavor, predictably, proved to be financially burdensome. However, fueled by his fervent desire, he fully committed to the project. He even began scouting properties in Jefferson County, convinced that one of these would serve as the perfect location for the camp. His determination intensified when a congregant, a woman named Sandy Glass, asserted receiving a divine vision, affirming that the property Nick had his eye on was destined to become the site of the youth camp he envisioned. Sandy Glass, who was in her 20s, had already faced considerable hardships in her life. Her first boyfriend had passed away due to an unspecified illness, while her father succumbed to a construction accident. Additionally, her brother battled with addiction. Sandy was married to a man named Jimmy. Their financial situation had been strained for some time. They relied solely on Jimmy's income as a carpenter, with Sandy staying home to care for their children. Similar to Nick, Sandy struggled with reckless spending habits, often exceeding their means, resulting in frequent arguments between her and Jimmy. These disputes sometimes led Jimmy to express his frustration through yelling, or by withdrawing himself from the situation and spending hours at the bar. In a bid to address their marital conflicts, the couple sought help from the church and began attending marriage counseling sessions which were facilitated by Nick. At this point, Nick had served as the church's marriage counselor for several years. Many congregants had lodged complaints with Robert about Nick's counseling style, expressing discomfort over his tendency to focus predominantly on intimate inquiries, often dismissing other crucial issues. It appeared that discussions primarily revolved around matters of a sexual nature, neglecting other significant aspects. However, owing to the trust they had in P.B. Smith, who was still affiliated with the church, members presumed that Nick's role wouldn't be entrusted if he wasn't credible. However, by the fall of 1997, Pastor Robert had successfully displaced Smith, assuming the role of senior pastor, a decision fully endorsed by the church board. Smith and his wife then departed for Africa to engage in missionary work. Jimmy's parents, who were church attendees themselves, had viewed Sandy and Jimmy seeking church intervention as a hasty decision. They even questioned Nick's qualifications and experience in guiding their son's marriage. Their concerns deepened when Nick exhibited a conspicuous focus on Sandy individually rather than on the couple as a unit. This heightened attention extended beyond counseling sessions, leading to prolonged phone conversations and an excessive amount of time spent together both at church and even outside the church's surroundings. Jimmy's parents deemed the dynamic between Nick and Sandy as inappropriate, noting their extended interactions and increased closeness, which seemed to surpass the boundaries of a typical counselor-client relationship. Pastor Robert's wife, Pamela, had taken notice of Nick's conduct and had a private conversation with him, expressing concerns about his inappropriate behavior and advising him to focus on his own marriage. Following numerous complaints, Robert intervened, cautioning Sandy that her relationship with Nick was unacceptable and needed to cease. Sandy, feeling a sense of divine connection between her and Nick, reacted angrily to Robert's counsel. She wrote him a letter expressing her discontent, stating, "The judgment I feel from you makes it hard for me to believe that you accept my gifts at all, or that you have any confidence in my ability to hear God and use this to help anyone." The relationship between Sandy and Nick was already negatively impacting those around them. Don and Jimmy, along with his children from his marriage to Sandy, felt hurt. In fact, one of their children confided in Jimmy, revealing that Nick and Sandy had mentioned Nick becoming their new father when Jimmy died. At church, Dawn started sharing her distress with friends, revealing her financial turmoil and her earnest desire to have children, a wish Nick vehemently opposed. As 1997 drew to a close, Nick engaged in relationships with multiple women besides Sandy. He was seen engaging in private conversations and prolonged phone calls with these women. Simultaneously, Sandy's purported visions intensified, urging Nick to prioritize the establishment of his youth camp and to allocate more time to their relationship, as she believed they were destined to be together. Dawn, on the contrary, made numerous efforts to rekindle Nick's happiness with her, even going to the lengths of attempting to lose some weight. Certain women within the congregation endeavored to console her, affirming that the issues between her and Nick were not a result of her actions, but rather stemmed from Nick himself being the core problem. Regrettably, her life hadn't unfolded as she had envisioned when she entered into marriage with him. Fast forward to Christmas, Dawn woke up feeling under the weather. Despite being sick with a cold, she and Nick visited her family, spending the whole day together. Later, in the evening, they headed to P.B. Smith's residence, joining his family for some time. Plans were set for Nick to go hunting with Lindsay, Smith's daughter, and her friends the following morning. On the 26th, just before dawn, Nick met up with his companions at Hood Canal Bridge in Jefferson County for the hunting trip. After spending a few hours in the woods without firing a single shot, they decided to leave and headed to a local diner for breakfast around 9 a.m. While everyone was eating, Nick suddenly stood up, appearing concerned, and exclaimed, "Dawn and I haven't opened our Christmas presents." Around 9:30 a.m., Nick departed from the diner and returned home by 10 a.m., only to discover the tragic news of his wife's demise in a fire. Investigators revealed that the fire initially remained contained in the bedroom, sparked by a malfunctioning space heater. The inferno rapidly escalated due to the presence of newspapers and wrapping paper within the room, worsened by the multiple propane containers on the floor. Strangely, despite Nick informing his friends at the diner less than an hour earlier that they hadn't yet opened their Christmas gifts, he informed the authorities that they had indeed opened presents the previous night. He explained that due to Dawn feeling unwell, she retired to bed without tidying up the wrapping paper. Additionally, Nick claimed to have received the propane tanks as a Christmas gift. The couple's ongoing home renovations had led them to rely on space heaters during the winter. Back then, such heaters lacked the safety features seen in modern versions, which resulted in frequent fires and fatalities. Police found no discrepancies in Nick's account. Being a local pastor as well, Nick's standing in the community left law enforcement with no reason to suspect anything other than an accidental death for his wife. Concerned for their pastor's well-being, Nick's congregation sought ways to support him during what they believed was an immensely challenging time. Pastor Robert even proposed attempting to resurrect Dawn through prayer, but Nick declined, citing his wish to spare her any potential pain. This refusal surprised Robert, given Nick's prior willingness to engage in church activities, including the exorcisms they had previously attempted. Mary Glass, Sandra's mother-in-law, harbored immediate suspicions about Nick's involvement in Dawn's death, convinced it wasn't accidental. She urged her husband to approach the police, but this never materialized. Within days, Dawn's death was officially labeled accidental, and the Bremerton police relinquished the case to Nick's insurance company. Nick had already submitted a request to process Dawn's life insurance policy. Family and friends found it peculiar that Nick was dealing with the life insurance so swiftly after Dawn's passing. However, considering the couple's substantial debt and Nick's aspirations for the youth camp, they rationalized his urgency for the money. Some church members found Nick's grieving methods rather unusual, but they refrained from expressing concerns, assuming that everyone copes differently with grief. The church community organized a celebration of life event, serving as Dawn's funeral, where family and friends gathered to share stories and commemorate her life amid their sorrow. Nick remained entirely composed throughout the funeral, and even delivered a 45-minute eulogy. Friends assisting in tidying his home stumbled upon photos of Dawn tucked away at the back of a closet, which seemed as if he wanted to discard them. Subsequently, Nick displayed a harsh and insensitive attitude, not just towards some church members, but also to neighbors and friends. Beyond maintaining multiple relationships with women from the congregation, Nick shockingly engaged in an intimate relationship with Diana, Dawn's own mother, under the pretense of mourning as a widower. Nick's behavior had become intolerable even for Pastor Robert, resulting in Nick being asked to depart from Christ Community Church. This expulsion proved to be a significant blow to Nick, marking the outset of his escalating troubles. On April 10, 2001, Sandy, accompanied by her lawyer, met with the county district attorney and received an immunity offer in exchange for her testimony regarding a long-held secret dating back to the morning of December 26, 1997. According to Sandy, on the morning of Dawn's demise, Nick allegedly contacted her and confessed, saying, "I did it." However, their conversation was abruptly interrupted by another incoming call on Sandy's phone. Putting Nick on hold to answer the call from somebody from the church who informed her about Dawn's incident, Sandy later returned to her conversation with Nick, seeking clarification on what he meant. But Nick only reiterated, "It's done, it's done." Sandy refrained from pressing for more details about the call for several weeks afterward. Eventually, when Sandy confronted Nick, he confessed to administering a substantial overdose of Benadryl to Dawn and suffocating her by placing a plastic bag over her face. The heartbreaking aspect is that Dawn remained partially conscious, witnessing her husband suffocating her through the plastic bag. After ensuring she was no longer alive, he strategically arranged old newspapers and wrapping paper around the room, positioning them beneath her body, and positioned the propane tanks near the bed. He arranged the heater too in a way that it would start a fire, intending to obliterate any evidence of a crime, and instead staged the incident as an accidental fire. Dawn's autopsy findings indicated an absence of soot or carbon monoxide in her lungs and blood. The pathologist in charge of Dawn's examination attributed her death to an accidental fire and overlooked crucial evidence regarding carbon monoxide's adherence to red blood cells. This oversight led them to conclude, given Dawn was a pastor's wife, foul play wasn't involved, neglecting to convey that carbon monoxide attaches to red blood cells, implicating the absence of breathing during the incident. Despite an overdose of 5 times the normal amount of Benadryl, it was deemed insufficient to cause respiratory failure. The pathologist dismissed the possibility, suggesting Dawn, even in a drowsy state, would have reacted to the rising heat. Notably, crime scene photos revealed newspapers beneath Dawn's body, an unsettling detail that went largely unnoticed. While a fire marshal raised suspicions and conversed with the police, the ultimate decision regarding the accidental nature of Dawn's death didn't fall within his jurisdiction. Nick was arrested on September 12, 2001, at a Kinko's parking lot, where he staunchly denied any involvement in Dawn's death, attributing his arrest to the church's attempts at sabotage. Despite his assertions that the church members could inflict substantial harm, Nick faced first-degree murder charges with bail set at $750,000. Sandy's narrative, as conveyed to investigators, appeared bizarre, adding to the frustration stemming from the nearly 4-year delay in considering Nick as a suspect or making an arrest. Her reason for cooperating was equally exasperating, driven by anger over Nick's involvement with other women from the church and feeling exploited. According to Sandy, at that point she concluded that God disapproved of their relationship, consequently implying that Dawn's murder was against divine will as well. Church members, when questioned, recounted Nick's peculiar behaviors and inappropriate relationships, expressing dismay over his failure to even purchase a headstone for Dawn's grave following the life insurance payout. On September 17, 2001, Nick appeared before a judge and entered a plea of not guilty. He asserted that his church had cast a curse upon him, alleging that Pastor Robert possessed a malevolent influence far darker than comprehensible by the police. Nick's trial commenced, prompting a modification in the charges due to the prosecutor's doubts regarding the judge's inclination toward the death penalty, initially sought with the charge of first-degree murder. The charges were amended to aggravated first-degree murder, carrying a sentence of life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. The alteration in charges stemmed from the arson Nick had committed, enabling this revised charge. Witnesses, including the women who were involved with Nick and various church members who had undergone counseling with him, provided testimonies that illuminated Nick's conduct to the jury. These accounts shed light on the significant influence wielded by the church in their lives. They detailed experiences of purported visions and direct messages believed to be from God, exploited by Nick for rationalization and manipulation. Smith's daughter testified, recounting her introduction to Nick through her father and how Nick had groomed her during her teenage years. Their sexual involvement ensued shortly after Dawn's death and persisted until she eventually relocated about a year later. Doctors and forensic experts also testified, emphasizing that Dawn's body held vital clues regarding the events of that day. However, these indicators were overlooked, as mentioned earlier, due to Nick's status as a pastor, despite the abnormal absence of soot and carbon monoxide for someone who was alive and breathing during a fire. The defense vehemently contested these allegations, focusing efforts on framing Sandy as the jealous, vengeful ex-partner, fabricating accusations upon discovering Nick's infidelity with various women. Nonetheless, on December 26, 2002, 5 years post-Dawn's tragic demise, the jury deliberated for a mere day before delivering a guilty verdict for aggravated first-degree murder against Nick. During the subsequent sentencing on February 7, 2003, Nick addressed the courtroom, comprising Dawn's friends and family, vehemently maintaining his innocence while expressing remorse for his actions and expressing sorrow over their loss, acknowledging Dawn deserved better. Nick received a life sentence. However, in 2007, an appeal to the state Supreme Court led to a revision of his life sentence. The appeal contended that since Dawn had already perished due to Nick suffocating her, the original charge of aggravated first-degree murder, pertaining to death by arson, didn't align with her actual cause of death. The defense argued that Nick therefore didn't deserve a life sentence. Ultimately, the state Supreme Court ruled in favor of the appeal, altering Nick's sentence to 26 years in prison. While in prison, Nick has actively supported educational initiatives and co-founded the Environmental Advancement Reintegration Network. He initiated a waste management system, employing worm composting, and even delivered a TED Talk centered on sustainability. Unfortunately, it is indicated that he will become eligible for parole in 2025 and could potentially be released soon. Dawn, gone soon, but not forgotten. Unfortunately, the life she had pictured with whom she believed was the one didn't turn out to be the actual reality, and sadly in the process led to the ultimate betrayal and her heartbreaking and untimely demise. Our heartfelt prayers and thoughts extend to her departed soul and the loved ones she left behind. For those who knew her only on the surface, 45-year-old Lauren Stewart appeared to lead a life of perfection. A dedicated wife to Dan, a loving mother to her adult children, Stephen and Bethany, it seemed as though fate had truly smiled upon her. Weeks before her unthinkable act, she delved into a dark world, exploring haunting paths on YouTube, delving into methods of ending her own life, and mastering the use of a Glock handgun. This is the enigmatic tale of Lauren Stewart. Lauren Devine Stewart was born on January 9, 1973. She spent most of her life in Michigan, and her work history included part-time personal training at YMCA in Farmington Hills and occasional house cleaning. After leaving the Jehovah's Witnesses, she had pursued modeling and acting, exploring her creative side through workshops and networking with photographers. She was regarded as a charming and very pleasant woman. According to one of her profiles on the internet, she wrote, "I love acting and modeling. I'm a very passionate person and it reflects my work. I'm adventurous in nature, and so I like a wide variety of acting and modeling experiences. I enjoy learning new things, especially with good direction. Sharing relative ideas, new and old, intrigues me. Life is an adventure, and my goal is to die knowing I did the things I wanted to do." Lauren was married to a man named Daniel Stewart. Dan worked at the University of Michigan. At the forefront of technological innovation, he served as a lead software architect, dedicated to developing technology for predicting heart attacks. He worked in the technology industry for many years as a coder developer. Together with his wife, they remained devout Christians within the Jehovah's Witness denomination for an extended period, until 2013 when they decided to explore and take a different approach to their spiritual life. The couple had two accomplished children, 27-year-old Stephen and 24-year-old Bethany. A data solution architect and a computer whiz, Stephen, like his father, shared a passion for technology, while Bethany showcased her talents in art and graphic design. At 45, Lauren Stewart had it all: a flourishing husband, two college-educated children, a budding modeling career, and a charming Kego Harbor home adorned with a welcoming heart wreath on the door. But behind this facade of perfection lurked a hidden pain. Lauren grappled with the heartache of exclusion and rejection from the religion she and Daniel were born into. Just a few years back, Lauren and her husband chose to break away from the Jehovah's Witness faith, a Christian denomination notorious for its strict indoctrination and the practice of shunning former members. The idyllic exterior masked a complex web of emotions and choices that would soon unravel into a gripping narrative. You see, up until 2013, Lauren and her family had been devout Jehovah's Witnesses, strictly adhering to beliefs that shunned celebrations like birthdays, Easter, Christmas, or any other event they believed went against the teachings of Christ. In addition, their faith strongly discouraged higher education, putting Stephen and Bethany at risk of being excommunicated if they pursued college in the future. Dan, however, envisioned a brighter future for their children through higher education. When they sought approval from the church elders to let their kids pursue degrees, the response was resolute: disobey the church's policies and face disfellowship. This threat weighed heavily on the Stewarts, as almost everyone they knew, including their extended family, were part of the congregation, and according to the church's rules, excommunication would mean complete isolation, even from their own flesh and blood. After careful consideration, the Stewarts made a bold decision to leave the religion they had long embraced. Although it initially felt right, the community's disapproval became unbearable, especially for Lauren. She described how simple tasks like grocery shopping were marred by dirty looks and hurtful comments from once-believed friends. Even though the belittling remarks were not spoken directly to her, they were intentionally made within earshot. Residing in a small community of just 3,300 residents, many of whom were Jehovah's Witnesses, the Stewarts grappled with the reality that the members in good terms with the church would consistently remind them of their outcast status whenever the opportunity presented itself. This emotional burden took its toll, leading to a breaking point. In search of a lifeline, Lauren turned to the gym, making it a regular part of her life to rebuild her physical well-being. Her transformation was so remarkable that she secured a job as a fitness instructor, leveraging her natural beauty to become a model with surprising success. To those who crossed her path during this time, Lauren appeared pleasant, exuding optimism despite her church's rejection. Yet beneath her facade of confidence lay a profound and unimaginable suffering. Chronic depression, an affliction she battled even before the shunning, intensified with each passing day. Desperately masking her inner turmoil, she would occasionally reveal cracks in her facade, quickly concealing them with a fake smile. One of Lauren's most guarded secrets was the family's crippling debt, pushing them to the edge of ruin. Faced with a dual onslaught of financial and emotional distress, she devised a plan to resolve all her problems at once. Haunted by her inner demons, Lauren Stewart's descent into darkness was both chilling and heartbreaking. She delved into grim research, scouring YouTube for methods of ending her own life and instructional videos on handling a handgun, all leading up to a fateful day. On February 15, 2018, she left a poignant note on the dinner table, meticulously tidied the home, and texted her loved ones as well as her husband's boss. Just before the unthinkable act, she turned over all the family photos on a secretary desk. At 9:24 a.m., she sent a message to her husband's boss that said, "Mark, this is Lauren. Dan had an accident this morning and died. I can't talk now. Someone will inform you later on the details at hospital." The boss reached out for further details but got no response. Hours later, at 5:07 p.m. on the same day, she reached out to her cousin confessing she had become evil and said the following words: "I took my husband and kids with me so that they don't have to feel my selfish act. They will sleep until Christ resurrects them. I truly hope you do better where I failed." To which her cousin responded, "Lauren, you are scaring me. What are you saying? Don't do it, Lauren." Lauren had become more and more detached from reality in recent months. Unbeknownst to her family, she had a pistol in her possession and had tragically decided to turn it against the very people she professed to love, one by one. This heartbreaking culmination of her internal torment resulted in a devastating series of acts. Her first victim was her husband, 47-year-old Dan, who unsuspectingly relaxed in their furnished basement. Lauren, armed and determined, used a throw pillow as a makeshift silencer and shot him in the head as he attempted to flee. With her most significant threat eliminated, she ascended the stairs. Upstairs, her 24-year-old daughter, Bethany, who had recently celebrated her birthday, lay asleep in her room. Without hesitation, Lauren positioned herself just feet from the bed, aimed the gun, and ended her daughter's life in an instant. Next, her son Stephen, who had his own place across town, unknowingly arrived at the family home, lured by false pretenses. Oblivious to the imminent danger, he busied himself with the task his mother had prepared. With his back turned, unaware of what was coming, Lauren, the mother he loved, shot him at point-blank range. The horrifying scene didn't end there. Lauren took the life of the family dog, placing its body in the bathtub. A neighbor had heard these shots, but assumed someone was slamming doors. As the house became a chilling temporary morgue, she meticulously tidied up. The darkness culminated as Lauren turned the gun on herself, using a method she had researched online. The cousin who Lauren had texted tried texting her back, but Lauren never responded. The cousin went over to her house the following morning on February 16th with a friend. With no response at the door, they contacted the police for a welfare check. When police arrived at the house the morning of February 16th, the kitchen was organized. The refrigerator was stocked. Handwritten labels were on various items, and a calendar hung on the refrigerator. Their discovery began with the family dog in the bathtub, triggering a chilling response from the officers who feared there was an active shooter. "Get your gun out! There's a dead dog in the tub!" one had yelled to a partner. Climbing a spiral staircase to the second floor, they found Stephen Stewart on the floor, believed to have been shot while seated on a chair. In another room, Bethany lay lifeless, shot in her sleep with a pillow muffling the sound. Gunshots were also noticeable on the pillowcase. Dan Stewart was discovered on the basement floor in front of a couch, his right hand still in his jeans pocket. The slightly pulled white pocket liner on his left pocket suggested he was standing when he was shot and attempted to react, thus pulling the pocket liner. Upstairs, Lauren was discovered at the base of the stairs, a pistol by her side, her self-inflicted wound between the eyes echoing her online research. 2 notes were found on the dinner table. One was for the medical examiner, while the other, a chilling suicide note, exposed Lauren's inner turmoil. I allowed evil into my heart when I chose not to accept God's free love, and it made me sick inside, Lauren wrote. I killed my family because I know my death would stumble them. At least now they will not suffer and will be resurrected to life forever in peace. As the police delved into the Stewarts' world, a complex and perplexing picture began to emerge. Interviews with family members, friends, and neighbors painted the couple as reclusive, marked by a sense of estrangement after leaving the Jehovah's Witness church. Lauren's history was marred by her own struggles. Some family members said Lauren, who had 11 siblings, suffered from depression, which was later on compounded by the weight of motherhood. In recent years, she spiraled into religious fixation, often launching impassioned tirades. Her family members, including her father and sister, revealed the extent of the emotional distance that had grown over time and had not spoken to her in years. Her mother had passed away when she was 13 years. Estranged for years, they saw Dan as the catalyst pulling Lauren away from them and never really cared about him. They also shared troubling insights about the couple's mental health, characterizing their relationship as a fusion of mutual distress. To those who knew Lauren, her defiance of the Jehovah's Witness faith marked her as an apostasy, a label that spoke to her outspoken opposition to the organization and her decision to leave it. The heart-wrenching tragedy left a deep scar on the lives of those who knew the family intimately. Joyce Taylor, a longtime family friend, was visibly shaken, believing that the murders were a direct consequence of the Stewarts' rejection by the Jehovah's Witnesses. Taylor and other former members shed light on the harsh reality of leaving the faith. They explained that once you depart from the church, even your own family members who remain within its fold are forbidden from interacting with you, a severe form of shunning that takes a heavy emotional toll. According to Taylor, Lauren and Daniel's desire to provide their children with a college education clashed head-on with the religion's teachings, which frowned upon such pursuits. The collision between their aspirations and the rigid doctrines of their faith set the stage for a tragic unraveling. They were shunned everywhere and every way possible. If Lauren went to the grocery store, they didn't look her in the eye, Taylor said. When you're raised a Jehovah's Witness, they choose your friends. They choose who you associate with, and if you go against that, they will disfellowship you or shun you. In a shocking turn of events, Joyce Taylor stormed into a Kingdom Hall meeting in Union Lake, seizing the moment to confront the congregation. Standing on a chair, she boldly criticized the gathering, her voice resonating with a mix of anger and sorrow. "Excuse me, everyone," she declared. "My name is Joyce Taylor. 2 days ago, 4 people died as a result of your shunning process." Taylor's outburst sent shockwaves through the room as she pushed away congregants and vented her pent-up frustration, shouting, "5 years ago, you people pulled your support from this small family. The only support they had was you people. You turned them away and you shunned them. And for what?" she exclaimed. "Because they wanted to raise their children as they saw fit." The police were aware of the family's issues with their former church, but declined to comment. Police records detailed how Lauren had recorded a poignant 2-minute video on February 6th at 11 p.m., explaining the depth of her despair. She cited a multitude of issues, expressing her inability to carry on and her desire not to burden others any longer. Abandoned by her church family, Lauren found herself drowning in a relentless sea of despair, with what she believed to be the only escape: death. Convinced that ending her own life was the solution to her unbearable suffering, She made the agonizing choice to also take the lives of her loved ones, sparing them what she perceived as the inevitable shame and suffering that her actions would bring upon their household. Police records painted a grim picture of Lauren's mental state in the lead-up to the tragedy, noting her unmistakable signs of severe depression and increasingly abnormal behavior. It appeared that she had immersed herself in a personal interpretation of religion, intensifying her depression. Shockingly, she never sought professional help or counseling, and no prescription drugs or alcohol were found in her system. However, traces of marijuana were discovered, not just in Lauren's system, but also in her husband and sons. The police investigation unraveled a complex web of factors contributing to her devastating actions. Loneliness, the severed ties with family and friends over religious differences, and deep-seated emotional scars stemming from alleged childhood sexual abuse all converged to amplify her anguish, ultimately driving her to commit the unthinkable. In a striking testament to the estrangement within the family, Lauren's sister's response spoke volumes. She exhibited a somber demeanor and expressed a surprising lack of surprise when hearing the news of her sister's actions, demonstrating just how far Lauren had drifted from her own sister, who even showed little regret about the tragedy. While the motives behind Lauren Stewart's horrifying actions may have been due to the profound isolation imposed by her former church and her childhood trauma, it begs the question, could things have taken a different turn had she reached out for help when she felt suffocated by her circumstances? Tragically, rather than seeking counseling or professional guidance, Lauren chose a path of self-destruction with devastating consequences for all involved. As we reflect on this heart-wrenching tale, our thoughts are with the victims whose lives were tragically cut short and the loved ones they left behind.